St. Augustine is one of the greatest Catholic saints and philosophers, and he is going to deal with two philosophical issues. One of them is known as the problem of evil, and the other one has to do with the free will and God's omniscience. The problem of evil concerns the idea that if God is all good and all powerful, then how can it be that evil exists in the world? Augustine gives a very persuasive answer to the problem of evil. Augustine says that God is perfectly good and all things do come from God. God made the universe and he made it good. It is not possible that God could create anything that is evil. Augustine points out the nature of evil. Evil is the absence of good. It is nothing positive. It is only negative. It is the lack of goodness. Suppose that you have an injury on your leg. The injury or the wound on your leg is nothing in itself. It is nothing but a deficiency of health. It is the absence of health. The substance itself is the leg. The lack of goodness is the injury. So the lack of goodness or health in the leg would be the evil. Evil is the lack of goodness in a substance. All things are made good, but the goodness of something, it can increase or decrease. But the goodness of substances can never fully vanish because the substance itself would cease to exist. If you have somebody who is doing wicked things, doing evil things, they are participating in non-being, in the lack of goodness. So even if you have an evil person who does vice constantly, when that individual dies, the evilness will be gone. It will vanish. It will disappear. Because evilness, it's really nothingness. It is a lack of being. It is the absence of good. But when that evil individual dies, what is left? You have the body. And the body will ultimately deteriorate and turn back into the earth. That material of the decomposed body, that's a good. That earth provides nutrients for things to live. Somebody can come and they can plant a tree in that area where people have died. So all evil eventually disappears and the good remains. Now, why does God permit human beings to choose evil? God permits human beings to choose evil because even in the choice, whether it is a good choice or a bad choice, it still shows the goodness of God. When somebody makes a good choice, they are participating in the goodness of God. But even if somebody commits or does a bad choice, an evil choice, the goodness of God is still shown. When God allows an individual to choose either good or bad is itself a good. The fact that you can choose between something bad and something good, that is a good. Your free will, your ability to choose is itself a good. Just about every person would recognize that the ability to choose between options is better than not having the ability to choose. Who would rather be like a rock instead of a human? Who would rather be like a cat instead of a human being? Rocks and plants and cats, they do not have the ability to choose. Having the ability to choose something is a good. So the will itself can be recognized as a good in itself, even if somebody chooses evil. Now, somebody choosing evil is not the will of God, but God will bring some good out of it. This seems to be something that is recognized or can be recognized in nature. When an individual does some sort of evil act, there is usually some good that comes out of it. In fact, you would be hard pressed to find an evil act that happens that somebody commits, but no good comes out of it. Every time there is some sort of murder or theft or harm done to another, there's usually a good that comes out of it. Some sort of forgiveness, some sort of healing, some sort of community happens. There are virtues that are strengthened after some sort of evil act, not to mention the unseen good that comes out of evil acts. The point being is that God may allow or permit evil to occur, but this does not deny the ultimate goodness of God. The problem concerning the free will and God being all-knowing is that if God is all-knowing and he knows all future, past, and present events, how is it that human beings make free choices? If God already knows what's going to happen, am I really free to choose what I choose? I mean, if God already knows what's going to happen in my life and who I'm going to marry and the mistakes I'm going to make and all this, then are my choices really free? Aren't they predetermined? So this seems to deny the idea that we have free will, that our choices are really choices. And this can be a huge problem because if our will is not free and we don't really choose, then we are like robots. We're like machines. You're not really choosing to marry who you marry or to eat what you eat. It was already predetermined. You had to do that. This also leads to the idea that what you see in everyday life and what you experience, it's an illusion because it seems as if you do make free choices. If we have no free will, then our everyday life where we think people are choosing freely and all this, it's not real. It's an illusion. And furthermore, you cannot hold anybody accountable if there is no free will. The main reason why somebody is accountable for their actions is because we assume they freely chose to do it. So the denial of the free will and free choice is a real problem for everyday living, and especially for the pursuit of knowledge. But on the other hand, if God does not know the choices that we are going to make, then God is not all-knowing. God is not omniscient. And if God is not all-knowing, then basically that God doesn't exist, because all-knowing, all good, all-powerful, these are all essential characteristics of the Christian God. Augustine solves the problem by explaining that when a human being acts, when a human being chooses, that human being is the one that is the cause of the action. That human being is the cause of the choosing. God knowing something and an event occurring is not the same as God causing an event to occur. The cause of events occurring in everyday life with human beings is the human. Because an event has a cause, it does not mean that God is the cause. So when a human being chooses something, when a human being wills something, that human being is the cause of that action. That is the power of the human will. So God knows the order of events that are going to happen, but he is not causing these events or these acts of will of human beings. The human being is the cause of their actions. The human being is the one who chooses to do something. This idea keeps intact the responsibility of human beings. So God knows what is going to happen in the sense that you know that your child is going to tell a lie or two in the future. If you're a parent and you have a child, you can pretty much predict many things that that child is going to do. You know that they are going to be stingy with their toys and their food. You know that if you buy them this new toy or you give them this piece of candy, that they are going to act a certain way with their brothers and sisters and their friends with that toy or with that candy. This doesn't mean that you're the cause of what they choose to do. It just means that you know the order of events that are going to take place. Your mind is limited and you still know what's going to happen. You can still predict with certainty what's going to happen with your child in the future. You know that your 5-year-old child in the future sometime will tell a lie. You know this with certainty, and you're limited. Your mind is finite. God's mind is infinite. God is all-knowing. So of course God would know what we're going to choose in the future. God knows our proclivities. God knows our habits and our mindset more than we know. God is all-knowing. So even if you can predict things about your children and maybe even some of your friends on what they're going to do, and you could predict it with a pretty good amount of certainty, think of how greater God is than you. So of course, God would know with much more certainty what the future events will be without being the total cause of all those future events. In particular, the cause of your free will. The important point here is that this philosophy being laid down by St. Augustine is keeping the integrity of the free will intact, because if the integrity of the human free will is not kept intact, it will lead to many philosophical disasters. Because if human beings do not have a free will, then they cannot be held accountable for their actions. People are responsible for what they do. St. Augustine says that the evil will is a defective will. The evil will is a will that fails to choose the good. The evil will chooses non-being, because evil is non-being. It is not God who is the cause of you doing evil. It is your choice. And this defect of the will in choosing to do evil is evil in itself, because the choices that you have in the world involve things that are good. Everything initially is made good. The evil human being, the evil will, chooses to use these things in the wrong way. It is this lack of goodness in the soul that is evil.